Imagined it's the 1930s. Britain is an island, but it feels completely exposed. There's this chilling belief that the bomber will always get through. People are terrified, digging air raid shelters in their backyards, practicing what to do when the sirens wail. The government is even handing out gas masks. The fear of a sudden, devastating attack from the sky is real and palpable. London, the heart of the empire, feels like a sitting duck. Stanley Baldwin, a former prime minister, famously said it himself, casting a long shadow of dread over the nation. How could an island defend itself against an enemy that could appear out of the clouds at any moment? But in secret, a group of brilliant minds was working on a miracle. Led by Robert Watson Watt, they were developing a technology that seemed like science fiction, radio direction finding, or as we now call it, radar. They built a string of massive steel towers along the coast, a system called Chain Home. The idea was simple but revolutionary. Send out radio waves, and if they hit something, like an airplane, the waves would bounce back. By measuring the time it took for the signal to return, they could calculate the distance, height, and direction of the approaching aircraft. Early tests were promising, but would this new invention actually work when it mattered most? The fate of the nation was literally hanging on these invisible waves. Across the Channel, the threat was growing more menacing by the day. By 1940, Hitler had conquered most of Western Europe. His eyes were now fixed on Britain, the last major country standing in his way. He greenlit a plan for a full-scale invasion, codenamed Operation Seal. But before he could send troops across the water, he had to control the skies. Hermann Göring, the head of the German Air Force, the Luft, boasted that his bombers would smash the Royal Air Force and reduce London to rubble. He promised Hitler he would achieve air superiority in a matter of weeks, paving the way for the invasion. The Luftwaffe was the most powerful and battle-hardened air force in the world. On paper, Britain stood little chance. Then it began. In the summer of 1940, the first large formations of German planes started appearing over the English Channel. In quiet, dimly lit rooms along the coast, operators stared intently at their cathode ray screens. Suddenly, a small spike of light, a blip, would appear. Then another, and another. These weren't just random signals. They were the ghostly fingerprints of an incoming attack. For the first time in history, a nation could see its enemy coming from over 100 miles away. The radar operators would quickly plot the size, speed, and altitude of the enemy formation and relay the information to Fighter Command Headquarters. This was the moment of truth for Chain Home. The ghostly blips on the screen were the first line of defense against Göring's aerial onslaught. This early warning was the game changer. It was the decisive secret weapon in what would become known as the Battle of Britain. Before radar, fighter planes had to fly constant, exhausting patrols, hoping to stumble upon the enemy. This wasted fuel, tired out the pilots, and wore down the aircraft. Now, with radar's guidance, everything changed. When the blips appeared, the operations rooms could scramble the perfect number of fighter Spitfires and Hurricanes too. The exact location and altitude needed to intercept the bombers. They could meet the Luftwaffe head-on, exactly where they needed to be. It was like seeing the enemy's hand before they played their cards. The Germans were baffled. They'd arrive over the English coast, expecting to find clear skies, only to be met by swarms of RAF fighters, seemingly appearing out of nowhere. The Luftwaffe's strategy was to overwhelm the RAF. They sent hundreds of bombers and fighters in massive waves, trying to exhaust Britain's defenses. But radar turned the tables. It allowed the RAF, which was heavily outnumbered, to manage its resources with incredible efficiency. Instead of being caught on the ground, pilots were in the air, ready and waiting. This efficiency meant that Britain's small force of pilots and planes could fight off a much larger enemy, day after day. Churchill would later call these brave pilots the few. But the few were only able to achieve what they did because of the many. The scientists, engineers, and radar operators working tirelessly behind the scenes. They were the unseen heroes who gave the pilots the crucial advantage they needed to win. Göring grew increasingly frustrated. His intelligence reports told him the RAF should be broken, but they kept fighting back with uncanny precision. He couldn't understand how. He eventually ordered his planes to target the radar masts themselves, realizing they must be important. But the masts were incredibly tough to destroy, and the system had built-in backups. The damage was usually repaired quickly. The failure to blind Britain was a critical mistake. Unable to break the RF, and with winter approaching, Hitler made a fateful decision. On September 17, 1940, he indefinitely postponed Operation C. The threat of invasion had been thwarted. The victory in the Battle of Britain, made possible by radar, was a monumental turning point in World War II. It was the first major defeat for the German war machine, and proof that they were not invincible. It ensured that Britain would remain a fortress, a base from which the Allies could eventually launch the D-Day invasions and liberate Europe. A single blip on a screen, a flicker of light in a dark room, represented the difference between victory and defeat, between freedom and tyranny. It was the moment that a technological marvel gave a nation under siege the eyes it needed to see in the dark and fight back against impossible odds. The quiet, humming radar stations along the coast didn't just win a battle. They saved the nation and changed the course of history. Thanks for watching. If you found this piece of history as fascinating as I do, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories like this one. See you in the next video.